Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Welcome back to Spanish Lessons with Professor Jason. I'm glad you've joined me for Lesson 6 in my 13-part series on asking and answering basic questions in Spanish. In this lesson, Lesson 6, I'll focus on how to ask and answer questions relating to studies, academic subjects, school, etc. But before we get to that, let me remind you about the other topics covered in this series. Okay, you can see from this slide where today's lesson fits into the overall sequence and what the other topics are. I recommend viewing the entire series in order, since I've designed it so that the vocabulary and grammar structures build on each other in terms of complexity. Alright, let's go to the whiteboard for our discussion of the questions and answers for today's lesson. Okay, so the questions we'll be discussing here have to do with being able to talk about your classes and study habits, yours or those of other people. Okay? So, maybe a first question to look at is simply, ¿Qué estudias? ¿Qué estudias? ¿Qué estudias? Okay? Literally, what do you study? But lots of times in English, here in the American system, we have majors, right? Majors. So this depends on the context a little bit, but if you know someone is a university student, if you want to ask them, what's your major, right? What's your major? This is the simplest way to do it. ¿Qué estudias? So forget this, forget anything your teacher might have taught you about. ¿Cuál es tu especialización? O ¿cuál es tu especialidad? Use this. ¿Qué estudias? Because if you ask any native Spanish speaker who's a university student, walk up and ask them, ¿Qué estudias? They're going to give you the primary discipline they're studying. In other words, they're going to give you their major, right? Their course of study. So, staying consistent with our focus here, we're going to conjugate. We're going to recycle the verb estudiar to answer. We're going to answer in the yo form, of course, estudio, and then whatever the main discipline is, right? Estudio matemática. Sometimes you see this in the plural, but matemática, or maybe química, chemistry, right? Or biología. If you just wanted a generic one, estudio ciencias, and I'm not going to write down an exhaustive list here, just a few. Maybe you want to say languages, estudio idiomas, por ejemplo, estudio inglés, estudio español. Notice I'm not using definite articles like el inglés o la química, just estudio química, estudio idiomas, estudio arte. It can be art of all kinds, right? Estudio música. Estudio historia. Estudio filosofía o teoría. Okay? Those are just some ideas, maybe of university level and even secondary level disciplines, right? Academic disciplines. So, best way to answer this, ¿Qué estudias? Estudio, and then pick one that you're comfortable with and that you can easily remember, right? In my case, estudio idiomas, okay? All right, let's move on to the next question. It has to do with studies. ¿Cuántas clases tienes? Remember with cuánto, any form of cuánto, whether it be masculine, feminine, singular, plural, they're asking about quantity. Again, excuse my handwriting. Quantity. ¿Cuántos? Right? ¿Cuántas clases tienes? We're going to answer with the yo form of the verb tener, tengo. And so in a semester context, at a university, for example, you might be talking about tengo cinco o tengo cuatro clases. Okay? And then you might list them, right? Tengo cinco clases. Arte, historia, música, idiomas, ciencias, right? All right. So that one's pretty straightforward. ¿Cuántas clases tienes? Okay. Again, they might add something onto this. For example, I should have put an ellipsis before the question mark. It could be ¿Cuántas clases tienes los lunes? Right? O ¿Cuántas clases tienes esta semana? So there's variations on this basic question as well, obviously. Right? Esta semana tengo solo 3 clases. Las de historia, música, e inglés. ¿Cuántas clases tienes? ¿Cuál es tu clase favorita? ¿Cuál es tu clase favorita? Right? Again, watch how much we recycle from this. Mi clase favorita, and I think the best formula for this is mi clase favorita es la de, okay? Mi clase favorita, agreement here, clase is feminine. Mi clase favorita es la de química, which would make you a nerd, right? But we need good chemists. Mi clase favorita es la de, this is what most of you would probably put, right? Es la de español. Mi clase favorita es la de español, right? Or, you know the question is asking about your favorites. It's a like or preference type question. You could say, ¿cuál es tu clase favorita? Pues, which sort of means well in Spanish, pues, me gusta mucho la de arte. Okay. Pues me gusta mucho la de arte, pero mi favorita es la clase de filosofía, for example. Next question. This question has to do with days of the week. ¿Qué día tienes tu clase de? ¿Qué día tienes tu clase de, por ejemplo, español, right? That's one variation. ¿O qué día tienes tu clase de matemática? ¿Qué día tienes tu clase de química? Okay? Pretty straightforward. You can answer this in, guess, one word, right? ¿Qué día tienes tu clase de química? Los martes, if it's just once a week. O los martes y los jueves. Okay? Remember, when you want to express the idea of like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, in Spanish you're going to use the definite articles. Los martes y jueves. Los martes y los jueves. Right? ¿Qué día tienes tu clase de matemática? Tengo clase de matemática los lunes, miércoles y viernes. Right? So, day of the week. Someone might ask you what day you have a particular class. ¿Qué día tienes tu clase de biología? Tengo clase de biología, right, los martes y jueves. Getting a little bit more specific, what time is your class, right? Entonces, por ejemplo, ¿a qué hora es tu clase de arte? Remember, when you have a question that starts with a time question, ¿a qué hora? They're asking you, it's good almost to think of that as at, right? So that you don't confuse it with someone asking you, what time is it? From context, it should be clear, but ¿a qué hora is at what time does something begin or happen? ¿A qué hora es tu clase de arte? I'm going to give you sort of the long answer here, right? Mi clase de arte es a las 9:30, right? You could add de la mañana. It should be clear from context. That'd be kind of late for an evening class, but still. Mi clase de arte es a las. This is sort of the crucial part to get right in terms of the formulaic aspect, right? So when someone asks, what time is it? ¿Qué hora es? I answer with son las. This is different. I'm talking about what time something happens. Es a las 9:30. ¿A qué hora es tu clase de, what else do we got buried down here? Biología. ¿A qué hora es tu clase de biología? Again, I don't have to write mi or say clase de biología. Okay. Again, that might be great if you're in an oral interview exam type of situation, but in everyday conversation, the person would just say a las 10. ¿A qué hora es tu clase de biología? A las 10, or maybe es a las 10. But the full thing would be mi clase de biología es a las 10, and then you could add the days, right? Los lunes y miércoles. Okay. Mi clase de biología, or simply, ¿a qué hora es tu clase de biología? A las 10 los lunes, por ejemplo. Okay. Moving on. ¿Con quién estudias? ¿Con quién? Okay. Again, they're asking us with whom. You could say estudio con, and again, depending on context, they might just ask you, this might mean who are your classmates, right? Estudio con Juan y Eva, right? Estudio con Juan y Eva. O estudio con Julio y Andrea, right? ¿Con quién estudias, right? But You might be talking about, I study every weekend, and someone might ask, ¿Con quién estudias? Instead of your classmates, you're talking about who particularly is in your study group, right? Estudio con 3 colegas de clase, right? Estudio con 3 colegas is one way to refer to classmates. Estudio con 3 colegas. And then finally, if someone were a little bit curious after that, they might ask, ¿Dónde estudias? ¿Dónde estudias? ¿Dónde estudias? So again, recycling the verb estudiar, conjugating in the yo form. Estudio en, that would be our preposition that we want to use. Estudio en casa. Estudio en la facultad, on campus. Or estudio, por ejemplo, en la biblioteca. Oops. En la biblioteca. So again, just a few questions and answers you can ask, answer, or be asked, dealing with where, when, what you study, etc. Alright, that concludes Lesson 6 in my series on asking and answering basic questions in Spanish, and I hope you found it to be informative and useful. As always, I welcome your questions, comments, and suggestions. So if you have a moment, please do leave me a comment and let me know what you thought about this video lesson. I always appreciate your input and feedback. Remember, you can find lots more Professor Jason content right here or over at my website, professorjason.com. I'd also invite you to like my Facebook community or to follow me on Twitter. You'll see that information on the screen in just a minute. So, thanks again for watching. This has been Professor Jason, your guide to Spanish. I'll see you at the next lesson. Hasta pronto. Ciao.